The other thing is the Russians are prepared to strike Europe, and the decision has already been made. Latvia is on notice. If they allow, next week, there's the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. And that's where I'm headed to speak. But the day after I speak, Vladimir Putin speaks. The Ukrainians want to put drones into the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. They're not going to. If they fly through the Baltic corridor, then the Baltic nations will be destroyed, eliminated. That's just a statement of fact. And if Europe wants to do anything about it, then Russia will hit them as well. This is where Russia's at right now. They're just tired of playing games. They're tired of, dealing with stupid people. And they're just at the point right now where if you continue to attack Russia in a way that threatens it existentially, Russia will respond accordingly. Ukraine, unfortunately, is going to find out this lesson. It's the end of Ukraine. Ukraine will cease to exist in the state that it is. There will be unconditional surrender. Russia will control the government. The United States no longer has a vote. You remember how Donald Trump was talking about how we're going to have, security guarantees. We're going to have, we're going to control this and that and the other thing. U.S. doesn't have a vote. We're done. We actually backed out. We're finished. And they will never be invited back in. That's the reality. Europe's never been invited in, although they think they want to be invited in. Nobody will be invited in. This is between Russia and Ukraine.
Well, if you could react to this, Scott, I'm seeing a parallel here. We had the Trump administration since February 28th, since the beginning of the strikes in Iran, claim that everything was destroyed. And he said this for weeks and weeks and weeks. Iran's military capabilities, everything, missiles, drones, Air Force, Navy, all of it gone. And when you were talking about the way that Russia is being portrayed now across a wide range of the political spectrum in the West and in the United States, it's Russia is on the back foot. Russia, they even tried to claim that the retaliation is a way to try to convince people everywhere that Russia is not weak. But last time I checked, these wars, the United States, NATO, they instigated these wars, and yet they're the ones who have not won them at all. Like, they haven't won these wars. So it's an interesting thing when the United States, NATO, Europe, I guess the collective West as it is, claim that others are weak, that they're targeting, and yet they are the ones that are stuck and unable to dictate any outcomes in it. I find that very curious. What's your reaction to it?
Well, let's look at the statement of fact. Remember that you don't have to put that chart up, but the chart that you had there before. And they talked about a framework agreement. That's a framework agreement between the Trump administration and American defense contractors, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and others, that they're going to ramp up production. There's no money been attached to that, so therefore it's purely theoretical. Nothing's happening. That's the state of U.S. defense industry, totally incapable of meeting the demands of modern war. As we saw, a 37-day campaign against Iran has literally drained the arsenal of the West. An ongoing conflict with Ukraine has done the same with Europe and what's ever left of the United States arsenal. Zero. Russia, on the other hand, has been building up its defense industry. It's just chugging along like you wouldn't believe. And Russia's not just building things and using things. That's how we operate in the West, by the way. That's one of the reasons why we don't have massive stockpiles, because you can't convince Congress of the need to overproduce and have 5,000 weapons sitting in a warehouse that may never get used. And if they never get used, then they get outdated, and that means we just spend a lot of money on weapons because our weapons are very expensive. So we can't overproduce them. We have to produce just the number we need to meet certain benchmarks of training and operational storage. But our operations are always based on short wars because we're going to intimidate the enemy into surrendering. We don't have any plan for long wars because we can't produce enough weapons to support a long war. Look at this 37-day war. We couldn't do it. Russia, on the other hand, operates only on the concept of long wars. So their defense industry is not just producing weapons for this war, but remember, their military went from 900,000, then was expanded to 1.2 million, and now is currently expanded, I think, to over 2 million. That's a lot of people. Where are they getting their weapons? From Russian defense industry. And it's not just guns and uniforms and ammunition. It's the weapons of war, tanks. I love when I hear stupid people like Jeff Fisher, some retired colonel idiot, who's like, the Russians don't have anything. The Russians have everything, Jeff. Everything you don't have, everything the West doesn't have. They've been producing tanks, armored personnel carriers, artillery pieces on a regular basis, and they don't go to the front lines exclusively. They go out to equip the new units that have been created, like the 70,000 strong new Army Corps in the St. Petersburg military district that has armor, artillery, everything. And you don't just build armor, artillery, you have the ammunition that they need to fight a sustained war. So they build up the ammunition stocks as well. This is what Russia is doing. Russia will never run out of ammunition. Look at Oreshnik. Russia's fired 3 of them. The first 2 were experimental models. I don't know what this one was, probably a serial production one. They went into serial production in August. Let's just call August a wash, meaning we plan on going to serial production, but we haven't quite produced it yet. So September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May, 9 months. Minimum production, 5 Oreshniks. 9 times 5, 45. 45 minus 1, 44. They have 44 Oreshniks. That's minimum production. Maximum production, based upon what I experienced when I worked at Vodkensk, they could probably produce, they were running out the, annual production for the SS-20s, 80 a year or so. But let's just call it, let's break it down. Let's call it half. The bottom line is that there's 60 or so. The Russians probably have somewhere, around 50, 60, 70 Oreshniks. That's a lot. They're not all going to be used against Ukraine. There's Oreshniks that are set aside for, first of all, Belarus, which has its own regiment, 9 launchers. Each launcher probably a complement of 2. That's 18 missiles that can be armed and fired against Europe. There's other regiments out there. Germany's got its own Oreshniks attached to it. England does, France. The Oreshnik covers a whole bunch of stuff. They have long-range, Iskanders, thanks to the fact that we got out of the INF treaty. The Iskander K now probably operates in a range of over 2,000 kilometers. That can hit Europe as well, also hit Ukraine. But they've been producing these. They've been producing these and producing them. When the war first started, the Russians, the Iskander was a Army-level battlefield support weapon. So in order to fire an Iskander, it had to go up the chain, and an Army-level commander had to say, we're going to hit that target. You understand that that is not a responsive targeting. That is a strategic targeting, command and control, command posts, airfields, in support of a larger operation. Today, Iskanders, on a daily basis, are literally on launch-ready mode with a forward observer with a drone. And he can sit out there, boom, and he gets a target that is deemed worth hitting, troops training, something. He can direct the Iskander to be fired instantly, and it will hit the target. Why can they do that? Because they've produced so many Iskanders, they can now bring it down to be literally a battlefield support weapon. The Russians have nothing but ammunition. And they're, the British just 500,000 Russian dead. No, probably 300,000. That's probably an accurate number. But the British can't tell the truth because they're involved in the psychological operation. Now, 300,000 is a lot. That sort of matches the numbers that we lost in the United States in both theaters of World War II. So anybody pretending this isn't a bloody war is wrong. But the Ukrainian numbers are about 2.2 million right now, dead. When you add wounded, over 5 million. And the data seems to support this. Even Scott Blaber, Pete Blaber, former Delta Force guy in the know, has come out and talked about millions of Ukrainian dead. Because that's the truth. We can try to disguise it any way we want to. The Russians aren't losing 30,000 men a month. It's not even close to that. The Ukrainians are losing 1, 2, 3, 4,000 guys a day. And they can't recruit enough. There's a deficit there. This is the reality. The Russians are doing everything right. They're not doing it the way some in the West would like it to do. There's a lot of people say, want it to end, want it to do this, want it to do that. Russians are doing it their way. Frank Sinatra literally sang a song about them. They've done it their way. This is the reality. The Russians are winning this war. And now the Russians are going to win the mental war aspect too, because they're going to flip the script on the British, and it's going to be the collapse. When the Russians begin this campaign of taking down Ukrainian, decision-making centers, they're going to make it lethal to be somebody working with the Ukrainians. Right now, underground, there's a whole bunch of NATO guys, a whole bunch of American guys in there working with the Ukrainians. It's going to become lethal to do this. They're not going to hit the embassy and kill American diplomats. But if Americans have any of their technicians underground in a center, they're going to die. And when that happens, the rats will leave the sinking ship, and the Ukrainians will be on their own, and it'll eventually lead to the total collapse of Ukraine, which could happen as soon as this summer. June is going to be a critical month. I mean, that's why I'm excited. I didn't know about this when I decided I'm going to Russia in June, but I'm going to be in Russia in one of the most important months of this entire. This is a month of decision. I think the outcome's obvious, but still, it's going to be contested. Zelensky has announced that June's the month where he's going to launch the long-awaited drone offensive that was supposed to break the will of the Russian people. 16 to 20,000 drones are being provided by the British. Zelensky's talking about launching up to 6,000 drones a day against Russian targets. The Russians will counter. It's going to get ugly fast. It's all going to happen in June. I don't know if, they say St. Petersburg at night, you're supposed to go out at night. They raise the bridges. You look at the ships go through the stars. It's beautiful. I think we might get a different light show altogether because this is the reality of war. But it's going to be a major month. And I think it's going to be the month that Ukraine stops functioning as a modern nation state and starts functioning as a nation in absolute collapse, absolute decline.
Yeah, Scott, I know you have an appointment soon. I was going to ask your final thoughts on Cuba, but maybe because the U.S. is preparing for war supposedly there, but maybe a quick comment on that, and also if you have any last words before we end here.
Sure. Well, on Cuba, it's just simple. It looks like we're trying to apply the Venezuela game book on this. The same thing, indict Maduro, justify removing him. We indict Raul Castro, justify removing him. The thing about Venezuela, though, is that Venezuela once was totally owned by the United States. Chevron was in there. We owned all the families, the big families. You had the Hugo Chavez come in, have his revolution, and Maduro took over. But at the end of the day, unfortunately for the Venezuelan people, the CIA was able to come in, reestablish contact with people, and buy them out. And that's what happened. We bought out Venezuela. Okay, now we want to put that same model in play at Cuba. Well, Cuba, the revolution was in the 1950s. The mafia that was there is no longer there. Those families have long left, like, Marco Rubio's family. And so the people that are in Cuba today are revolutionaries, people of the revolution, all they've known as revolution, and they will defend the revolution. You can't buy them out. You're not going to buy them out. Are they strong? Well, no, they don't have a lot of weapons. They've been under sanctions and all that. But the notion that Cuba is going to collapse is a fundamentally flawed notion. And I certainly hope we don't test that thesis because it'll go very bad for us. We don't have the troops to take on Cuba. We can't occupy Cuba. And if we tried to occupy Cuba, we'll get involved in a very, very bad fight with the Cuban people. It'd be tragic for the Cuban people, but it'd also be tragic for the United States. So that's my feeling on Cuba, that we think we can accomplish something that we're not going to be able to accomplish. If we try to accomplish it, it'll be yet another failure for the United States. Now, moving on, just to conclude, as I said, I'm heading to Russia next week. I call it the revenge tour because, the last time I tried to go to the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, the United States government stopped me at the airplane, took my passport, and said, you can travel. What we now know, because of certain criminal cases of ongoing in Russia, is that the Ukrainians asked the U.S. government to pull my passport because the Ukrainians didn't want me to speak at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum because the Ukrainians were afraid of what I was saying, that I was deemed to be, and we know this is the case, the Center for Countering Disinformation called me the #1 enemy of Ukraine at the time. I'm still up there. The Mir Tvorets list had me marked for death, and they still have me marked for death. They send a letter bomb to my house. Yay, Postal Service for doing jack shit. But so it's real. This is real and all that. They tried to stop me. They're the ones who submitted a false affidavit through the FBI office in Kiev that triggered an FBI raid on my house, claiming that I was a Russian agent. It's a classified affidavit. I'm still not allowed to have access to it. But again, through other sources from Russia, we know that it was the Ukrainians that did this. And the Ukrainians probably don't want me to travel this year, but I don't think the Trump administration is receptive to Ukrainian input as the Biden administration was. But the bottom line is I'm going. And it's going to be a big deal. I'm really looking forward to it. And after that, I'm spending the better part of a month doing things. I can't say what I'm doing, but I can say it's going to be perhaps the biggest thing I've ever done in Russia. And I go to Russia as an independent journalist. I pay for everything myself. I'm not subsidized by anybody but you. And what I'm saying this is I've got a big program in place. It's about 85% funded. I mean, I'm going and I'm going to get a lot done. But there you can go and get a little bit done, a certain level of funding. You can go and get most of it done. Then you can go and get everything done. Right now, I'm at the most of it done point. I would just make an appeal if people go to scottritter.com to the donation page there. if you could do some donations and help me get over there so I could get everything done. Just today, an opportunity came up. Again, I can't talk about it, but it's a unique opportunity. It's never been done before by anybody. And I just need help to be able to do it because I have to pay for everything. I have to pay for drivers, security. I have to pay for interpreters. I have to pay for all the video production, all that kind of stuff. So to do things, as this new opportunity comes up, it has to be funded. And so that I'm just making an appeal right now because this is going to be a cool trip. It's going to be a dangerous trip, but it's going to be a cool trip. And the information that I gather is sent back to you, the public. I publish articles. I do videos. It gets back to you. It's designed to empower you with knowledge and information. So view me as your tool and help me get the job done. And I'd appreciate it. Which means we can't fight a sustained fight against China. And we can't fight a sustained fight against Russia. And we're not in a position to support others because we're out of ammunition. We're literally out of ammunition. We got nothing left. So we've taken America off the board in terms of relevance. We can't even threaten anything. We can't even get our act together on troops in Poland. 4,200 aren't rotating in, but 5,000 are going in, but Congress hasn't approved, so 5,000 aren't. We don't have anything. We're literally a bunch of hot air coming out of the mouths of the most irrelevant people in the planet. Unfortunately, there are some relevant people that are doing relevant things. The British are very relevant. The British have been running a very successful campaign, which sought to divert the focus of effort away from the battlefield reality where, contrary to popular belief in the West, Russia is dominating across the battlefield. Things are not going well for the Ukrainians and haven't been for some time now. But the British have been playing a different game, a mental warfare game, designed to collapse Russia from within. Anybody who thinks that that's not possible, take a look at the collapse of the Soviet Union. You'll understand how mental warfare played a role in getting Russians to stop believing in themselves, Russians to start looking to the West as a dominant society, to lose faith in your leadership, to lose faith in everything, to abandon, what you're supposed to be, who you are. That's what happened in the decade of 1990s. Vladimir Putin did a reversal and built Russia up to where it is today, where they're proud of themselves with just reason, and all this stuff. We're trying to break that down again. That's what mental war is. And one of the things we're doing is exploiting the fact that Vladimir Putin doesn't want to escalate, that Vladimir Putin wants to keep this war confined to Ukraine and deal with the limited objectives of making sure Ukraine doesn't join NATO and doesn't retain Banderist Nazi ideologies, things of that nature, doesn't pose a threat to Russia. So the West has been testing him all along. Every time a red line is drawn, F-16s, red line, Third World War, F-16s come in, Russia just responds by killing the F-16s. HIMARS, ATACMS, shooting them down, nullify them. How many times? When was the last time you heard about ATACMS doing anything worthwhile in Ukraine? You don't. It's the same thing. Every escalation is managed by Russia. Operation Spiderweb, drones coming in, hitting bombers. That should have triggered a massive response. Russia just blew it off because they said it doesn't change the fundamental direction we're heading. We're doing okay. But the British have been focusing on asymmetric warfare, hybrid warfare, using drones. Everybody talks about Ukrainian drone operations. At the tactical level, the Ukrainians, I think a lot of the innovation is theirs. But when you get up to the strategic level, this is 100% a British-driven operation assisted by the CIA and in Germany. Firepoint, a Ukrainian drone production company, is, look at the CEO. She's some girl with no education who's just a bimbo who was given the job to serve as a way to steal money to enrich Zelensky. But the British took it over and made it something real. The FP5 Flamingo is a British-made weapon, that's fired against the Russian strategic depth, claiming to be Ukrainian. Before this war started, the Russians made a point to Joe Biden. We will not tolerate NATO missiles based in Ukraine that can hit Russia's strategic depth. Now you have NATO missiles based in Ukraine that hit Russia's strategic depth, a red line that was crossed. But the Russians went, we can ride this thing out. We can do this. The same thing with the FP1s, this wooden, drone that flies in and hits oil rigs and all that. The Russians are blowing it off, saying it's not a big deal. But there's a continuing echo chamber going out there, shouting out about how weak Putin is, how impotent Russia is, how this, that, and the other thing. And it's starting to resonate within certain segments of Russian society. And you start to get defeatism. You got people start doubting Vladimir Putin. Now, it hasn't reached critical mass. It's a long way from doing that. But it's there. This latest attack against Starbelsk Teachers College is the straw that broke the camel's back. I don't know if Ukraine and Great Britain intended it to be this way. I don't even know if they hit us, if they knew up front they were hitting a teacher's college. I actually think that AI assisted in the designation of this target, just like we did with Manab, clearly a school for children, but we bombed it thinking it was the headquarters of a missile brigade. Here they thought, because they saw photographs of students from another college, not this one, wearing military uniform, that this was a military facility. It's not. Those students were students who were participating in a game. They're non-combatants, not affiliated with the military, everything. That's the reality of it. But the AI doesn't see that, because AI is not intelligent. AI just does what the people programmed to do. They saw a photograph and said, this school is a military target. And then the attack was sent in. FP1 drones, 4 of them, each one outfitted with air-to-ground rockets. That's the new variation, which means that somebody has to see it, because you don't fire air-to-ground rockets in the blind. This isn't a situation where you program in a GPS coordinate and the FP1 flies out there and flies in and dives in where it tells the dove. There's another drone above this. There's Starlink connectivity, we know, because they got the antennas, and it's being broadcast back to a command center. And that command center is seeing the target. So these drones come in and they cycle off their air-to-ground rockets. The eyewitnesses on the ground say, we heard rocket fire. We could see the rockets come in. We can hear the rockets come in. FP1 is a propeller-driven thing. It's not a rocket. So rockets being fired. Cycle back, fire again. Cycle back, fire again. 4 times. Then they dive in at the end, because they carry 200-kilogram bombs. Dive in, boom, 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 collapse the building, kill 21 students. This resonated in Russia unlike anything. I mean, even in Kursk, when in August of 2024, when the British and American-led Nazis, literal Nazis, I mean, when I say Nazi, I mean swastika-wearing Nazis, went into Kursk, and the Russians couldn't evacuate the elderly from the border villages quick enough. And so hundreds of them, 600 or so, were captured. They were all murdered, butchered, raped. These Nazis were raping 80-year-old women, filming it. And then they go off and they get killed, and the Russians get the bodies, they get the cameras, and they have it. This is not speculation. This is statements of fact, and that didn't trigger this Russian reaction. The Russians still went, we'll just kill them, kill 60 to 80,000 of them, recapture the territory, and keep moving. We're not going to escalate. This attack is different. It hit Russia at the wrong time, and it basically has created an outrage that cannot be ignored by the Russian government. So what the Russian government did, first of all, is respond with a massive strike designed to take out the units responsible. Remember when I said that Starlink was involved? The problem with Starlink involved is that that signal that's going back to have some guy watch this gets intercepted. And the Russians knew where it was. It was probably being run out of, there's a facility south of Kiev where the Ereshnik hit, a white church, it was called Bely Cirkov. Hit these